Today, I want to talk to you guys about career development. More specifically, I want to talk about the lifespan, life space approach by Donald Super. Of course, this is presented by myself, Raymond Snodgrass. In or around the 1940s, Donald E. Super, pictured to the left, created what we know as the lifespan, life space approach. He didn't really consider himself a theorist, nor did he believe he created a theory. He actually considered what he did his contribution to segments of future theories. The main focal point of Super's theory is known as self-concept. Super believed that one's self-concept changes over the course of his or her lifetime. He also believed that it is developed with each experience a person encounters, especially in the terms of work environment and coworkers. One of the main parts that he adds to this is that it is also shaped by the individual's life roles. Whether you're talking about a person who's younger, that doesn't have any kids, who isn't married, or somebody who is married and is a parent, and how that affects the type of career that they want to have. Along with the life stages mentioned in Super's theory, he also talks about developmental stages. Pictured to the right is his life rainbow, which is a visual representation of people from birth all the way up through retirement. You can see on this picture that it talks about the different life roles, which are child, student, leisure right, citizen, worker, homemaker, or parent. It also includes other lifestyle factors that could play a role in the development of the person: environmental determinants, situational determinants, and personal determinants. Another term that I want to talk about that Super mentions is career maturity. And if you can look at the pictures above, the picture to the right would represent a person who's just entering into the workforce or maybe just entering into his or her chosen career. The person could be lost, confused, they're not going to be confident in their ability. As that person grows and gains more time within their chosen career, they're going to get more training, they'll get more certifications, maybe they'll go to school, and just on the job training, they can learn how to be leaders. They can be competitive against people within their industry. Super's lifespan life space theory is broken down into 5 stages. The first stage is from birth to 15 is the growth stage. After that, we have the exploratory stage from 15 to 24, establishment stage from 25 to 44, maintenance stage from 45 to 64, and then last is the decline stage, 65 and older. Now, through each of these stages, obviously, comes a different part, things that we're going to do in our life. In the growth stage is developing capacity, attitudes, interests, and needs according to the one's self-concept. During the exploratory stage, an individual may have several jobs in different fields, but will start to narrow down his or her field choice. During the establishment stage, the person figures out through trial and error what he or she needs to do to stay in the chosen career. And during the maintenance stage, they start making necessary adjustments to further their career. They could be going to school, they could be getting certifications. And then after that, finally, we have the decline stage. This is when the person is ready for or nearing retirement. Some may continue to work in a reduced capacity. They may reduce their hours in their careers that they chose. They may retire and choose to work a part-time job somewhere else. Others may simply retire and choose to enjoy their life. Much like his developmental stages, Super also talks about developmental tasks. One notable difference between the task and the stages is that the age range for the tasks are much more narrow. The first task that Super talks about is crystallization, where the person starts to formulate general vocational goals. They can do this through awareness of resources. They think about the contingencies, their interests, and their values. The next task that he talks about is specifications. It happens from 18 to 21. At this point, the person is starting to explore their tentative preferences, moving toward a specific field of choice. From the ages of 21 to 24, you start working on implementation. At this point, the person is entering into the workforce. They're starting to compete for preferences against other people. Then from 24 to 35 starts the stabilization task, where the person is starting to confirm the career that they chose. They do this by work experience and using the skills necessary, which proves to themselves and other people that they do belong in the field that they chose. At the age of 35 on, they start working on consolidation, which is establishing a career by advancement and gaining service time. This again is where people start going to school. Maybe they want more training. It's all kind of based on how much school they've had versus the experience they have now. Over the next few slides, we're going to give a breakdown of the developmental task in each life stage. So the first one we're going to talk about is in adolescence. During the growth stage in adolescence, the person starts to develop an understanding of and learning how to develop self-concept. After that, the exploration stage, they start learning about employment opportunities. Then in the establishment stage, they start to focus on the work requirements for the opportunities they're interested in. The maintenance phase, they start actually making career decisions. And then after that, the decline stage, which is where they focus less on leisure activities. To put that in perspective, if you think about when we grew up, we got to run around, we got to have fun, we got to go do what we wanted to go, we got to do whatever we want. But as we got older, we had to start thinking a little bit more serious about what we were going to do when we got out of school. So after adolescence, we move into early adulthood. During the early adulthood and the growth stage, the person starts to improve relationships with other people, whether that be from a social aspect or through coworkers. During the exploration stage, he or she starts to focus on opportunities within the current workplace. Once they hit the establishment stage, they start finalizing positions. This is where they've probably moved up to the point that they want to be wherever they're working. They start to affirm their career goals and during the maintenance stage, probably through job satisfaction and where they're at, where they want to be at in life at this time. And in the decline stage, you think about people who maybe in their 20s decided to join weekend leagues, softball, soccer, basketball, whatever. Well, during this decline stage, the sports that they play are starting to end, and they're going to start focusing a little bit more on what they need to do for the next stage of life. Middle adulthood can be an exciting yet scary time in a person's life. This is when a person may be getting married, or maybe the couple are starting to have kids, but in either regard, you have other people depending on you. You have a family to support. So it's important at this stage of the game that we develop our career so that we can stay in it, so we have the money to pay the bills and put food on the table. During the growth stage of middle adulthood, we start to accept and understand our limitations and strengths. It's important because even though we bring strengths to the table, which could be something that we learned as we were growing up or something within our personality that really helps us in the career, if we're not careful enough to pay attention to our limitations, they could come back to bite us. Now, it's during the exploration stage where we address our limitations. We develop, we problem solve to develop new tasks so that we can find ways around our limitations. During the establishment stage of middle adulthood, we start developing and improving our skill set. This again is where we talk about maybe going to school depending on what field you're in. If you don't have enough training, maybe you go get a different certification. Just whatever you can do to really help yourself stay in that field. Now, if you remember from earlier, we talked about career maturity. The maintenance stage in middle adulthood is where career maturity really comes into play. The person becomes competent in his or her career choice because they have the knowledge, they have the understanding, and that's where people start to become leaders. As we start to decline in middle adulthood, we just start to focus on essential activities. These are the things that we need to do to make sure that we stay in our job. We focus a little bit less on, hey, what do we want to go out and do tonight? We focus more on, let's make sure I can develop that career. So you can see in the picture to the left, it is a picture from the movie Up. For those of us who remember, some of us may have watched it with our children, while some of you may have watched it as children. You have Carl, the elderly gentleman, who worked his entire life so that he could save up and move to South America. Then along comes Russell, who really makes him take a serious look at his life role at that point. So during the growth stage of late adulthood, you start satisfying all of your life roles. Did I become the person that I want to be? Am I the parent? Did I turn out to be the parent that I want to be? Am I the grandparent that I want to be? After that, just like Carl, we start to look at where we want to retire to. We all know that in the United States, one of the popular places for retirement is Florida. During the establishment stage, we start fulfilling those personal goals. We start looking at how are we going to get to that next part of our life when we get to enjoy. During the maintenance stage, we start balancing work and pleasures. Again, this is one of those things where we get to focus less on work and now more on ourselves because we're coming to an end of our working career. So during the decline stage is when we start to reduce our role in the workforce, whether it's retiring and enjoying life or cutting down and working maybe a part-time job. I added this slide just to give you a visual representation of a person from birth all the way into late adulthood. You can see that the baby started off crawling, and as she started to grow, and finally towards the end, she's standing with the cane where she is in late adulthood and probably retired and enjoying life. So what is the counselor's role in the lifespan, life space approach to career counseling? According to Super, it breaks down into 5 steps, and the first step actually breaks it down into 4 sub-steps. But before you even get to the 4 sub-steps, you do an intake interview about the individual's career concerns, and you gather information from the person's school or other records that may be beneficial. Then you do a comparison between the two. Now, after that, you get into the 4 sub-steps. You assess the person's life structure, which is the social aspect or the work role salience. From there, you get into the perception of the work role, in which you're talking about career stage versus career concerns. A couple of the inventories used for this are the adult career concerns inventory and the career development inventory. Once we're done with that, we start to assess for interest, abilities, and values. And then after that, we want to assess this person's self-concept and life themes. So after we get through all of the assessing that is done in Super's theory, we move on to the rest of the roles of the counselor. The second step is the integrative interpretation. This is where the counselor actually takes the data and explains it to the client. From there, you move on to goal setting, which is based on the person's self-concept. After we've created the goals, we move on to career development procedures based on the career tasks. So this is where you might look at what the person wants to do and start figuring out what steps the person needs to take to be able to do that. From that point, it is a matter of processing where we start promoting career development, educating, mentoring, and just guiding the person through the process. One of the first things that I want to point out as I started to review the empirical evaluations is that the empirical research has been difficult within this theory. Now, there were a lot of good things said about it. Overall, most people view Super's work as predominantly positive. One person who actually had a lot of negative to say about it does believe that he created a monumental impact for career development in the future. Many believe that his research was mainstream. So this just means that society was and is actually going that direction. Now, some of the things that people did complain about, I looked at one study that was done in Nigeria where Super's theory did not show any significance whatsoever. It really had no impact on the career choices that people made. And then another one was that some of the people find that his theory does not offer a testable hypothesis. We do live in a society where people want to be able to look at and see the results of what the theory is going to look like. So to wrap up the presentation, I want to give you my thoughts about the lifespan, life space approach to career counseling. Things that I like about it is it does range from birth all the way to retirement. There are some other theories out there that only go up to early adulthood, in which case, people choose their career later on in life. Maybe they change careers for different reasons. That goes into the next one where we talk about it takes life roles into account. A person who maybe wanted a career in traveling may have suddenly decided that he or she wants to get married and have a family. So at that point, they need a career that would allow them to stay home. Work relationships are something else that can impact a career. You may love a job. You may love going into an office, but then when you get there, you may find out that the people there you just don't get along with. That might reshape the way somebody looks at a career. The other thing that I like is that it combines well with some other theories. One of the most notable for me is the happenstance theory, which basically states that a person chooses a career or a life path based on events that have happened to them throughout their life. If you think back to Carl and Russell from the movie Up, Carl was set. He wanted to move to South America so that he could retire in peace and get away from the hustle and bustle, not have to deal with any kids. And yet here come Russell. At this point, even though he fought it, eventually Carl does kind of accept Russell and has to change his life path a little bit. The one thing that I really didn't like about Super's theory was that the ages for the developmental task are too specific. I found that a little bit odd since his theory base goes from birth all the way to retirement. Why would the developmental tasks be all done within, the first 35 years of life, except for the last one, which continues on? So that being said, I hope that you learned a little bit, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation.